Number 11. Erica Graham. In the humid summer of 2012, the city of Houston, Texas, bore witness to one of the most heart-wrenching and deeply disturbing child homicide cases in recent history. Erica Graham, a 34-year-old mother, committed an unthinkable act that not only took the life of her own child, but also scarred the collective psyche of an entire community. Her name is now etched into the dark pages of America's most horrifying female criminal cases. Erica was known in her neighborhood as quiet and reclusive. A single mother of 4, she lived in a modest apartment complex and mostly kept to herself. But those close to her claimed they had noticed disturbing signs long before tragedy struck. Neighbors occasionally heard loud arguments, screaming children, and unsettling silence in the late hours of the night. Despite these red flags, no formal reports had been made about abuse or neglect. What happened behind closed doors remained a mystery, until it was far too late. On July 15, 2012, Erica's 5-year-old daughter, Keely Graham, was found dead in the family apartment. The scene was gruesome and deeply unsettling. The child's body was discovered with multiple signs of trauma, lying lifeless in the bathtub. When investigators arrived, Erica seemed detached, showing little emotion. Her statements were erratic and inconsistent. Initially, she claimed Keely had fallen in the tub, but forensic evidence quickly debunked that version of events. What emerged during the police investigation was shocking. Detectives discovered that Keely had suffered long-term physical abuse. Old bruises and healed fractures painted a horrifying portrait of prolonged violence. Autopsy reports revealed that the little girl died from a combination of blunt force trauma and drowning. Police soon uncovered surveillance footage from the apartment complex, showing Erica calmly leaving her apartment minutes after the suspected time of death, carrying trash bags believed to contain bloody clothing. As authorities dug deeper, a chilling motive came to light. Erica had been overwhelmed by her responsibilities. She was reportedly battling depression and financial hardship, and some speculated she had become increasingly resentful of her children. Court documents revealed she had once confided in a friend that she sometimes wanted to disappear and leave it all behind. But no one suspected she would take such a drastic and irreversible step. During her trial, Erica's defense team attempted to paint her as a woman pushed to the edge by mental illness, poverty, and lack of support. They introduced psychiatric evaluations that described her as emotionally unstable and suffering from post-traumatic stress. Yet the jury remained unconvinced. The severity of Keely's injuries and the repeated pattern of abuse spoke louder than any excuse. Jurors listened in stunned silence as the prosecution read from Erica's diary entries, pages filled with frustration, rage, and chilling admissions of being unable to control the darkness. In 2014, Erica Graham was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She now resides in a maximum security women's prison in Texas, where she is kept under observation due to concerns about self-harm. The case sent shockwaves through Houston and beyond. It led to widespread discussions about the failures of the child welfare system, the signs of abuse that went unnoticed, and the broader issue of maternal mental health. Advocates for child protection demanded stricter policies, while others focused on increasing mental health resources for struggling mothers. Today, Erica's name evokes sorrow, outrage, and confusion. How could a mother become a child's worst nightmare? What makes someone cross the line from desperation to destruction? And most chillingly, how many other children are suffering behind closed doors, waiting for someone to notice? The haunting story of Erica Graham and the tragic death of little Keely remains a chilling reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters wear familiar faces. Number 12. Kenyatta Brown. In 2011, the city of Atlanta was shaken by a crime so gruesome and emotionally jarring that even seasoned detectives struggled to comprehend the depths of its horror. At the center of it stood Kenyatta Brown, a 36-year-old mother who would go on to become one of the most disturbing examples of maternal homicide in Georgia's recent history. Kenyatta was not a woman unfamiliar to hardship. She had spent years grappling with mental illness, unemployment, and a string of unstable relationships. To those who knew her, she appeared exhausted, overwhelmed, and often distant. Friends recalled that she had once been warm and nurturing, but over time, she seemed to fade into someone they barely recognized, paranoid, erratic, and withdrawn. What no one could have imagined, however, was just how far that unraveling would go. On a humid August morning, neighbors heard a series of blood-curdling screams coming from Kenyatta's small apartment complex. When police arrived, the scene was nothing short of horrifying. Inside the apartment, they discovered the lifeless body of her 3-year-old daughter, Alana. The toddler had been brutally beaten, and investigators later confirmed she had been suffocated. Blood was smeared on the walls and furniture, and it was clear that a violent struggle had taken place. Kenyatta was found in a catatonic state, sitting silently beside her daughter's body. She was immediately arrested, though her behavior in the days that followed only deepened the mystery and horror surrounding the case. During questioning, she spoke in fragmented sentences, referencing demons, betrayal, and the belief that her child had been possessed. A psychiatric evaluation quickly followed. Court records later revealed that Kenyatta had suffered from severe untreated schizophrenia. She had reportedly stopped taking her medication weeks before the incident and had become increasingly delusional. Friends recalled she had been talking about being watched and believed that her child was being controlled by outside forces. Tragically, those around her dismissed her increasingly bizarre behavior as stress or burnout. The prosecution initially sought a conviction for first-degree murder, but her defense attorneys pushed for an insanity plea. Expert testimony confirmed that Kenyatta was experiencing a full psychotic break at the time of the killing, unable to distinguish reality from delusion. In 2013, she was found not guilty by reason of insanity and committed to a high-security psychiatric facility indefinitely. The case of Kenyatta Brown raised critical questions about the treatment of mental illness, particularly in marginalized communities. How had someone so clearly in need of help slipped through every safety net? Why had no intervention occurred, even when signs of her mental deterioration were evident? And most painfully, could this tragedy have been prevented? Kenyatta remains institutionalized, heavily medicated, and under constant supervision. Doctors say she occasionally becomes lucid and is haunted by what happened. In rare moments of clarity, she expresses remorse and confusion over her actions, unable to fathom how she became capable of such a horrific act. Alana's death stands as a heartbreaking example of what happens when untreated mental illness meets isolation and neglect. It also underscores the desperate need for better systems, mental health support, community intervention, and awareness to prevent similar tragedies from unfolding behind closed doors. Kenyatta Brown's name is now etched into Georgia's darkest criminal files, not as a woman driven by rage or vengeance, but as someone whose mind collapsed under the weight of madness, taking an innocent life with it. Number 13. Kamesha Jones. In the heart of Miami, Florida, a case unfolded that sent shockwaves through the city and left even the most experienced investigators speechless. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime that haunted people. It was who committed it. Kamesha Jones, a 29-year-old mother of 2, went from being a quiet, working-class woman to one of the most cold-blooded female killers in the state's history. Oh, at first glance, Kamesha appeared to be just another young woman trying to survive life's hardships. She worked odd jobs, kept mostly to herself, and was raising her children with little outside support. Friends described her as quiet, serious, and emotionally distant, but no one expected violence from her. But behind closed doors, Kamesha had been spiraling. Years of emotional abuse, unresolved trauma, and mental strain were building a dangerous pressure that would eventually explode. The breaking point came in June 2015. Zakieya had been in an on-again, off-again relationship with a man named Markel Freeman. According to those close to her, the relationship was volatile and abusive. There were reports of threats, arguments, and rumors that Markel had been unfaithful and even violent. Friends said Zakieya felt trapped and humiliated, but instead of walking away, she made a chilling decision. One night, after a bitter argument that allegedly involved accusations of cheating and child neglect, Zakieya lured Markel into her apartment under the pretense of reconciliation. What he didn't know was that she had been plotting his murder for days. Surveillance footage later showed Zakieya shopping for cleaning supplies, gloves, plastic sheeting, and a knife, items she would use within hours. When Markel entered her home, an argument quickly escalated into violence. Zakieya stabbed him repeatedly, showing no signs of hesitation or panic. She then left his body in the bathtub for hours, during which she calmly cleaned the crime scene. But what shocked investigators even more was what happened next. Zakieya texted several of Markel's family members using his phone, pretending he was alive and had left town. She went so far as to post vague status updates from his social media account to keep up the illusion. For nearly a week, no one suspected anything. But a foul odor eventually led neighbors to call the authorities. When police entered the apartment, they found Markel's body, partially wrapped in trash bags and hidden in the bathroom. The scene was gruesome and calculated. Blood evidence showed that Markel had tried to defend himself but was overwhelmed. Officers described the apartment as eerily clean. Zakieya had meticulously tried to erase all signs of the crime. Zakieya was arrested shortly after and charged with first-degree murder. During her interrogation, she showed little emotion. In fact, detectives noted how calm and collected she seemed, even when discussing the stabbing. Her lack of remorse chilled everyone in the room. During the trial, prosecutors painted a picture of premeditated murder fueled by jealousy, resentment, and years of emotional suppression. The defense argued that Zakieya was mentally unstable, suffering from undiagnosed PTSD and severe depression, worsened by the toxic relationship she had endured. However, psychological evaluations determined she was competent to stand trial. In 2017, Zakieya Jones was convicted and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She now resides in Florida's Lowell Correctional Institution, where she remains one of the most infamous women behind bars. Her case raised tough questions. How does a woman with no prior criminal history commit such a calculated murder? Was it a moment of rage or the product of years of silent suffering? And how many more women like Zakieya are silently teetering on the edge? Zakieya Jones's story isn't just about murder. It's about the dark and quiet places pain can take us when it's left unchecked. It's a haunting example of how love, betrayal, and desperation can twist a person into someone unrecognizable, even to themselves. Number 14. Zakieya Jones. In the early 2000s, a murder case emerged out of Memphis, Tennessee, that would haunt the region for years. It wasn't just the savagery of the crime. It was the pure unpredictability of who committed it. Zakieya Jones, a 31-year-old woman with no major criminal record and a reputation for being quiet and respectful, would ultimately be known for orchestrating one of the most disturbing revenge killings the city had seen in decades. Zakieya grew up in a struggling neighborhood plagued by violence, poverty, and drugs. She managed to avoid trouble for most of her youth, raising her children while working minimum-wage jobs and trying to stay off the streets. Friends described her as reserved and private, someone who kept to herself and rarely lost her temper. But beneath the surface, Zakieya was fighting personal demons, resentments, unhealed wounds, and a growing sense that the world was against her. The chain of events that led to her unraveling began with a heated family feud. Zakieya believed that her cousin, 26-year-old LaShonda Miller, had been spreading rumors about her, threatening her place in the family, and even interfering with her ability to find work. To Shawanda, LaShonda represented everything that had gone wrong in her life: betrayal, disrespect, and sabotage. On the night of the murder, July 15, 2003, emotions boiled over. Witnesses later testified that Shawanda had been acting strangely in the days leading up to the incident, pacing outside LaShonda's home, making cryptic statements, and talking about taking care of things once and for all. No one took her seriously until it was too late. According to court documents, Shawanda entered LaShonda's apartment armed with a kitchen knife. An argument quickly escalated into violence. Neighbors reported hearing screams, followed by silence. By the time police arrived, Shawanda had fled the scene, and LaShonda was found dead from multiple stab wounds. The living room showed signs of a fierce struggle, with broken furniture and blood spattered across the walls. What stunned investigators wasn't just the brutality, it was the intensity of the rage. The medical examiner later revealed that LaShonda had been stabbed over 30 times, indicating an emotional, personal, and possibly premeditated attack. Shawanda was arrested within hours at a nearby motel, where she was found sitting calmly on the bed, still wearing blood-stained clothes. During questioning, Shawanda confessed but showed no signs of remorse. Instead, she blamed her cousin for years of emotional abuse and betrayal, claiming that she couldn't take it anymore. Her words painted a portrait of someone who had mentally unraveled long before the actual crime was committed. At trial, prosecutors argued that the murder was a premeditated act of revenge fueled by jealousy, insecurity, and long-standing family resentment. They introduced text messages, voicemails, and witness testimony that all pointed to an escalating hatred between the two women. The defense attempted to claim temporary insanity, pointing to Shawanda's troubled past and her inability to access mental health care, but the jury wasn't convinced. In 2005, Shawanda Jones was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. The courtroom was silent as the verdict was read, with even Shawanda showing little reaction. It was as if the rage that consumed her had already burned out, leaving only numbness behind. Today, Shawanda is serving her sentence at the Tennessee Prison for Women, a maximum security facility outside Nashville. Fellow inmates have described her as quiet and distant, rarely engaging in conversation and spending most of her time reading or staring out the window. Her story stands as a disturbing reminder of how unresolved anger, family tensions, and emotional isolation can morph into something deadly. Shawanda Jones didn't kill out of impulse. She carried years of pain and resentment that eventually reached a boiling point. Many people ask the same question: could it have been prevented? If Shawanda had received therapy, had someone to talk to, or had found a healthy outlet for her pain, would things have turned out differently? No one will ever truly know. But one thing is certain: Shawanda Jones went from a quiet woman trying to survive to one of the most feared female killers in Tennessee's prison system. Her name now lives in infamy, not because of who she was, but because of what she became. Number 15. Tamika Jackson. Tamika Jackson's descent into infamy began not with a bang, but with a slow build-up of anger, betrayal, and obsession that simmered under the surface for years. By the time her crime stunned the public in 2011, she had already become a ticking time bomb, one that no one close to her had seen coming. Born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, Tamika had a difficult childhood marked by instability, poverty, and emotional neglect. Her mother struggled with addiction, and her father was largely absent from her life. She bounced between relatives' homes and juvenile shelters, learning early that the world didn't offer her much safety or love. Despite the hardships, Tamika was smart, quick-witted, and resourceful. She developed a tough exterior to protect herself and learned how to manipulate situations to survive. By her 20s, she was working various jobs and had become a mother. But life remained tough. She had difficulty holding on to stable relationships and often found herself entangled in toxic dynamics. One relationship in particular would prove fatal. In 2009, Tameka began dating Corey Benson, a local entrepreneur who was known for his charm and street smarts. Corey was charismatic and financially stable, everything Tameka thought she wanted. But as their relationship progressed, it became increasingly volatile. Tameka suspected Corey of cheating, and their arguments often turned explosive. Friends later recalled that Tameka had become possessive, even obsessive, about Corey. She checked his phone, followed him unannounced, and accused him of infidelity constantly. Everything unraveled one night in April 2011. Tameka showed up uninvited at Corey's apartment, where she found him with another woman. Fueled by rage, betrayal, and emotional instability, Tameka snapped. In a fit of uncontrollable fury, she retrieved a kitchen knife from the apartment and launched a vicious attack. Corey was stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck, while the other woman managed to escape and call the police. When officers arrived at the scene, they found Tameka sitting in the blood-soaked living room, crying hysterically. Corey was already dead. She was immediately arrested and charged with first-degree murder. During her trial, the defense argued that Tameka suffered from untreated borderline personality disorder and deep abandonment trauma stemming from childhood. Her attorneys portrayed her as a broken woman who lashed out during an extreme emotional crisis. But the prosecution painted a different picture: a jealous, dangerous woman who had carefully planned a deadly confrontation. The court heard chilling testimony, including voice messages and text exchanges that showed Tameka had threatened Corey in the past. In one message, she warned, "If I can't have you, no one will." That statement became a focal point for the jury. Despite her claims of mental illness and emotional instability, the evidence of premeditation was strong. In 2012, Tameka Jackson was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was just 29 years old. The case shocked Atlanta's community, not just because of the brutal nature of the crime, but because it revealed the depths of emotional suffering that can spiral into violence when left unchecked. For many, Tameka became the face of what can happen when love turns toxic and mental illness remains untreated. In prison, Tameka has remained mostly silent. She reportedly keeps to herself and participates in therapy and anger management programs. Some say she's remorseful. Others believe she still blames Corey for pushing her over the edge. Tameka Jackson's story is a grim reminder that not all killers fit the mold we expect. Her crime wasn't the result of a calculated scheme for money or revenge. It was the eruption of years of pain, fear, and unresolved trauma. But regardless of motive, the consequences were permanent. Corey Benson lost his life. His family was devastated, and Tameka, whose own life was shaped by instability, became part of a cycle of violence she could never undo. Number 16. Latoya M. Williams. Latoya M. Williams was a name few people knew until one chilling morning in 2013, when a horrifying discovery at a Milwaukee home would thrust her into the national spotlight as one of the most disturbing female offenders in recent memory. Latoya was born and raised in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in a working-class neighborhood. Her early years were marked by a mix of religious discipline and community involvement. From the outside, her life appeared unremarkable. She worked as a caregiver for individuals with disabilities and was known in her neighborhood as polite, quiet, and even helpful to others. But beneath the surface, Latoya was grappling with emotional instability and unresolved psychological trauma. Those close to her described her as increasingly paranoid and unpredictable in the years leading up to the crime. There were whispers of emotional abuse in her home, mounting stress and strange behavior, none of which were ever reported to authorities until it was too late. In September 2013, Police responded to a disturbing call at a residence on Milwaukee's North Side. A neighbor had heard screaming and suspected something had gone terribly wrong. When officers arrived, what they found would haunt even the most seasoned investigators. Inside the home, they discovered the lifeless body of LaToya's 2-year-old daughter, buried under a pile of blankets in a back bedroom. The child had suffered severe physical trauma. LaToya was inside the home, calm and eerily composed. She made no attempt to flee or deny what had happened. In fact, she admitted immediately to causing her daughter's death. The details she gave in her confession were shocking. LaToya claimed that she had become convinced her daughter was possessed by evil spirits. Driven by this belief and convinced she was protecting both herself and others, she performed what she called a home exorcism. But what she described was no spiritual ritual. It was a brutal and senseless attack on an innocent child. Medical examiners confirmed that the child had died from blunt force trauma and suffocation. LaToya's statements made it clear she was deeply detached from reality at the time of the crime. Her arrest made headlines, with many shocked that such violence could come from a woman who had, by most accounts, appeared nurturing. Investigators began digging deeper into her background and discovered a troubling history of untreated mental illness. Family members admitted they had seen signs for years: paranoia, delusions, outbursts, but they had chalked it up to stress or personal struggles. LaToya's defense team quickly entered an insanity plea. A psychiatric evaluation diagnosed her with severe schizophrenia and psychosis. Experts testified that she genuinely believed she was saving her daughter from a demonic force. The courtroom was divided. Some viewed her as a mother overwhelmed by untreated illness, while others saw a cold-blooded killer who had used mental illness as a shield. Ultimately, the judge ruled that LaToya was not mentally competent to stand trial at the time of the incident. Rather than being sentenced to prison, she was committed to a high-security psychiatric institution, where she remains to this day under close supervision. The case ignited widespread debate across Wisconsin and beyond. How could someone so visibly unstable have slipped through the cracks for so long? Why weren't there systems in place to intervene before tragedy struck? And how does society balance accountability with compassion when mental illness is involved in such a horrific act? LaToya M. Williams is no longer anonymous. Her name is etched into the list of America's most unsettling female offenders. Not because she was evil or vengeful, but because her actions, however unintentional, resulted in the ultimate betrayal of a child's trust, a mother turning into the source of danger. Today, her story is taught in some criminal psychology courses as a case study in the overlap between mental illness and criminal responsibility. She receives treatment, but there is no known timeline for her potential release. For many, the thought of her ever leaving state care is too disturbing to consider. LaToya's case serves as a grim reminder that untreated mental illness can become a powder keg, and when combined with isolation, religious delusion, and stress, the results can be catastrophic. What began as a woman spiraling privately ended with a child's life lost forever. Number 17. Jessica Austin. Jessica Austin's case is one of the lesser-known, yet deeply disturbing entries among America's most feared female killers. What makes her story stand out isn't just the brutality of her actions, but the chilling motivation behind them, one rooted not in rage or revenge, but in cold calculation and manipulation. Jessica was a 27-year-old woman living in Houston, Texas. She worked part-time at a nursing home and lived with her fiancé, Gregory Foster, in what appeared to be a stable, if unremarkable, relationship. To their neighbors, they were an ordinary couple, quiet, private, and seemingly drama-free. But what nobody knew was that Jessica was leading a double life online, one that would spiral out of control with deadly consequences. In 2011, Jessica began chatting with a man she met in a fantasy role-playing forum. The man, who lived in Georgia, was fascinated by her persona, a dark, seductive character who talked openly about death, dominance, and power. The two began a digital relationship that grew increasingly intense. Jessica began feeding him stories about her life, lies about being abused, being trapped, and being in danger. The goal? To manipulate him into doing something unthinkable. And the man, overwhelmed by emotion and convinced he needed to save Jessica, agreed to her plan. Together, they plotted the murder of her fiancé, Gregory Foster. Jessica promised they would be together once he was gone. She even mapped out the layout of her home and told the man when Gregory would be alone. On the night of the attack, Jessica left the door unlocked. Her online lover entered, armed and prepared, and assaulted Gregory in his sleep, stabbing him multiple times. But Gregory managed to fight back, and in the chaos, he overpowered the intruder, who fled the scene. Jessica, pretending to be a terrified witness, called 911. Police arrived to find Gregory bloodied but alive. As investigators began to dig into the attacker's identity, the story unraveled fast. Phone records, chat logs, and emails revealed everything. Jessica had orchestrated the entire plot from the beginning. The motive wasn't just to eliminate her fiancé. She wanted a new life, with a man she'd never met in person, based entirely on an internet fantasy. Jessica was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder and attempted murder. Her trial was widely followed in the local media, not just because of the violent nature of the crime, but because of the strange digital web she had spun. Prosecutors presented pages of chat logs where Jessica spoke coldly about how the murder would go, even discussing how to dispose of the body. There was no passion, no panic, just a disturbing level of control. In court, she showed little emotion. Her defense argued that she had been mentally unstable and influenced by online delusions. But the prosecution painted a picture of a woman who had complete agency, who manipulated someone into doing her dirty work and then tried to play the victim. Jessica was found guilty and sentenced to 40 years in prison. Her online lover received 25 years after accepting a plea deal for attempted murder. Gregory Foster, though physically recovered, never returned to his previous life. He spoke publicly once after the trial, saying he couldn't comprehend how someone he loved could have plotted his death so methodically. Jessica Austin now sits in a Texas correctional facility, far from the life of control and fantasy she once craved. Her case is used in modern criminology classes as an example of how digital manipulation, when mixed with real-world violence, can lead to shocking outcomes. What makes Jessica's case particularly haunting is the absence of direct anger or hatred. She didn't act out of heat. She planned, waited, and watched someone else carry out her intentions, all so she could escape into a fantasy that never truly existed. Her story stands as a reminder of how dangerous the combination of emotional detachment and digital obsession can become. Behind a calm face and ordinary life, Jessica Austin was quietly crafting a nightmare. Number 18. Clarissa Figueroa. Clarissa Figueroa's story is one of the most horrifying examples of calculated deception and unimaginable cruelty. Her case stunned the nation, not only because of the brutal act she committed, but because of how deeply it was rooted in obsession, loss, and a desperate attempt to reclaim something she had already lost forever. In 2019, Clarissa was a 46-year-old woman living on the southwest side of Chicago. Years earlier, she had suffered a devastating tragedy. Her adult son had died from natural causes. According to those close to her, Clarissa never emotionally recovered. Friends described how she would still talk to his pictures and visit his grave obsessively, but no one expected what she would do next. Clarissa became obsessed with the idea of becoming a mother again, not through adoption or surrogacy, but by faking a pregnancy and stealing a baby. To carry out her plan, she turned to social media, specifically Facebook. She began frequenting groups for expectant mothers, offering free baby clothes to connect with women who were pregnant and vulnerable. That's how she met 19-year-old Marlene Ochoa Lopez. Marlene was expecting her second child and was drawn in by Clarissa's generosity and kindness online. They chatted, and eventually, Clarissa invited her to her home to pick up some baby items. Marlene accepted. What happened next is almost beyond belief. On April 23, 2019, Marlene arrived at Clarissa's house. Clarissa, along with her daughter Desiree Figueroa, had been preparing for this day. Once inside, the two women attacked Marlene. Clarissa strangled her with a coaxial cable, while Desiree helped pin her down. After Marlene died, Clarissa cut the baby out of her womb with a kitchen knife. She then called 911, claiming she had just given birth to a baby who wasn't breathing. The newborn was rushed to the hospital in critical condition, and Clarissa pretended to be the mother. She visited the baby in the neonatal ICU every day, telling nurses and doctors she had delivered him at home. Meanwhile, Marlene's family was frantically searching for her. It took weeks before police finally connected the dots. Surveillance footage, phone records, and Clarissa's suspicious story began to unravel. DNA tests confirmed what Marlene's family feared. The baby was hers. When investigators searched Clarissa's home, they discovered evidence of the crime, including blood in the bathroom and Marlene's remains in a trash can behind the house. Clarissa Figueroa was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, along with her daughter Desiree and her boyfriend Piotr Bobak, who helped cover up the crime. The details of the case shocked the public, not just for its brutality, but for the cold calculation behind it. Clarissa had faked a pregnancy for months, even throwing herself a baby shower. She had built a web of lies so deep that even her close friends believed she was expecting a child. 8. In court, prosecutors described Clarissa as manipulative and remorseless. Her actions, they argued, were driven by a twisted obsession to replace her deceased son. She was willing to murder a young mother and mutilate her body just to steal the role of a parent again. Marlene's family was shattered. Her husband, Giovanni, spoke to the media with tears in his eyes, unable to understand how anyone could do such a thing. Tragically, the baby boy, named Giovanni Yadiel Lopez, survived for only 2 months before dying from severe brain injuries caused by the traumatic delivery. Clarissa is now in custody at a Chicago area correctional facility awaiting trial, as the legal process continues. Her daughter Desiree has cooperated with prosecutors and is also facing charges. The case has sparked national discussions about the dangers of online predation, especially in groups where vulnerable women seek support. What makes Clarissa's story especially chilling is the mix of maternal longing and sociopathic violence. It wasn't an act of sudden rage. It was a scheme planned and rehearsed. She studied her victim, lured her in, and executed a murder with disturbing precision. Her name is now forever associated with one of the most disturbing maternal impersonation crimes in U.S. history, a dark tale of obsession, deception, and irreversible loss. Number 19. LaTonya Bellamy. LaTonya Bellamy's name is etched in the records of one of New Jersey's most chilling and senseless murders, a brutal slaying that shocked the community for both its cruelty and the chilling lack of remorse shown afterward. What made it more disturbing? It was committed not for money, not for revenge, but for fun. It all began on September 19, 2010, in Irvington, New Jersey. Nia Hawk and Michael Mucciocchi, a young engaged couple in their 20s, had just returned home from celebrating their engagement. They were full of joy, excited to begin a new chapter together. But that happiness was about to be cut short by a twisted and violent plan hatched by LaTonya Bellamy, her cousin, and 2 other accomplices. As the couple pulled up in front of their home in Michael's white Honda CR-V, LaTonya and her crew ambushed them. Armed with weapons and fueled by a twisted desire for excitement, they forced the couple out of the car at gunpoint. The motive? They wanted to steal the vehicle. But the situation escalated far beyond a simple carjacking. Nia and Michael were ordered to kneel down on the sidewalk. There, without hesitation, LaTanya and her cousin, Shaquan Bellamy, shot them execution style. Both were struck multiple times in the head and body. They died on the spot, their blood staining the pavement in front of their home, the very place they had planned to start their life together. After the murders, LaTanya showed no sign of regret. In fact, she bragged about the killings in a rap video filmed just days later. The video surfaced during the investigation, and it showed LaTanya rapping about killing people and being down for a homicide. The lyrics mirrored the real-life horror she had just inflicted. The community was horrified. The senselessness of the act, combined with the cold celebration afterward, made this one of the most infamous crimes in recent New Jersey history. Police quickly tracked down LaTanya, Shaquan, and the others involved. During the trial, prosecutors painted a terrifying picture of young people who had lost all regard for human life, killing two innocent people for nothing more than the thrill. LaTanya Bellamy was convicted of murder, felony murder, carjacking, and weapon possession. She was sentenced to life in prison. In court, she showed little emotion. She never apologized, never explained. The families of the victims were left to grieve without answers, haunted by the knowledge that their children had been murdered for pure amusement. Michael's and Nia's families described them as bright, kind, and full of promise. Both were college graduates, working good jobs, and deeply in love. Their future was stolen in a matter of minutes by someone who thought murder was entertainment. LaTanya's crime shocked the country and left behind a story that still stings with injustice and rage. Her name remains a symbol of a generation's darkest instincts, one that chose death over decency and cruelty over conscience. Number 20. Shanda Crane. Shanda Crane's case stands out not just for the brutality of the crime, but for the betrayal that came from within a family. In December 1995, in the quiet rural community of Sun, Louisiana, a daughter turned against her own parents in one of the most cold-blooded and calculated double murders the state had ever seen. Shanda was 23 years old at the time. Outwardly, she seemed like a struggling young woman trying to find her way through college and life. But beneath the surface, she was carrying resentment, desperation, and greed. Her parents, James and Patsy Crane, were known to be generous and caring people. They had adopted Shanda at a young age and gave her a stable life on their small farm. But over time, their relationship with her had grown strained due to her erratic behavior, financial troubles, and repeated lies. On December 29, 1995, police were called to the Crane family home after a relative found James and Patsy dead in their house. James had been shot multiple times in the back while sitting in his recliner. Patsy was found in another room, also shot and killed in cold blood. There were no signs of forced entry. At first, investigators had little to go on. No apparent enemies, no robbery, no obvious motive. But suspicion quickly turned toward Shanda. Her behavior after the murders was odd. She didn't seem emotionally affected, and she immediately began asking about her inheritance. It was soon discovered that she had been forging her father's checks, stealing thousands of dollars even before the murders. Digging deeper, police found out Shanda had confided in her boyfriend, Brandon Como, about wanting her parents dead so she could claim the life insurance money and live freely. Investigators also uncovered the murder weapon, registered to James Crane, had been taken by Shanda. She had convinced her boyfriend and another man to help carry out the plan. Evidence from phone records, witness statements, and physical clues quickly closed the net around her. In a shocking confession, her boyfriend told police that Shanda had orchestrated the whole thing. She lured her parents into a false sense of security, waited until they were home, and then carried out the killings. The crime wasn't a moment of rage. It was a premeditated execution for profit. Shanda was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. At trial, Prosecutors showed the calculated nature of the murders, the motive of money, and the manipulation of those around her to commit the crime. The defense tried to argue that she was mentally unstable, that she had been pressured, and that she didn't fire the weapon herself. But the jury saw through it. She was found guilty and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Her cold and emotionless demeanor throughout the trial only added to the horror of the case. She had not only murdered the people who raised her, but had done so with chilling calm and self-interest. The case shocked the state and the nation. A daughter murdering her adoptive parents in pursuit of wealth felt almost too cruel to believe. But it was real. James and Patsy Crane had tried to help their daughter, had forgiven her many times for her mistakes, and in the end, they paid the ultimate price for that love. Shanda Crane now serves her life sentence in a Louisiana prison, a symbol of betrayal and greed that still haunts the community of Sun. Her story is often cited in discussions about parricide, manipulation, and the darkest potential within family relationships. It remains one of the most tragic and haunting family murders in U.S. criminal history.